Hello everyone, welcome back. This is the third installment in my Keeping It Simple series, and I'm working on a sympathy card. So I'm using Versamark ink and my anti-static tool, as well as embossing powder in white and black. And I have a little strip here for my sentiment and my card base, and my panel will be working with black cardstock. I have this stamp from Technique Junkies, Tulips with Text. It's absolutely stunning. Love it. And my sentiment is coming from Stampabilities, and I'm using Deepest Sympathy. And I have my Misty and my heating tool. So I'm just taking my black cardstock, my panel, and just putting it in my Misty and lining up the stamp as best as I can. And the cardstock is a little larger than my stamp, and I did that on purpose so that I can make sure that I stamp the entire stamp and I have that full image on my panel, and I will trim it down afterwards, if need be. So I'm just taking the Versamark ink and putting it all over my stamp, and this stamp honestly is so beautiful. You can use this stamp for absolutely anything. A birthday, a sympathy, congratulations, thinking of you, for just love with love. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous stamp. And there's a lot of different techniques that you can use with the stamp as well. So I'm stamping it here twice to get a really good impression. There is a lot of fine detail with the script that's behind the tulip. And there are actually words that you can read. I'm sure you know a lot of text or script backgrounds. They're just squiggly lines, or they're not words that you can actually read. These you can, so it's very fine detail. So I wanted to make sure I had a really, really good stamped image. And now I'm just pouring all the white embossing powder. This just comes to life on the black cardstock. It's absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely love this. You can use any color cardstock. You can do watercolor and just color in just the flower and leave like black and white in the background. I mean, there's so many different techniques you can do. And like I said, this stamp is appropriate for absolutely anything, and it's just gorgeous. If you just stamp it down and leave it alone, call it a day, it's a beautiful card. Like, I really, really love this stamp. So now I'm just going to clean up, and then I'm going to take my heating tool and just melt all this goodness, and I'll fast forward through that just so you don't have to sit and watch me melt an entire background. So that's it. That part is done, and now we can work on the sentiment. And I'll just put this strip. I thought it'd be a nice touch, since I'm using a black panel with white embossing powder, that for the sentiment I do the reverse. So I took a white piece of cardstock and I will heat emboss it with black embossing powder, and I just thought, that reverse look it would just stand out and add more interest to the card. This is, like I said, a very simple card. This takes absolutely no time to do. The technique is super simple, and so just to add a little interest to the eye, I thought it'd be nice to do the contrast. So I'm just stamping down the sentiment here, and you'll see I end up having an error. I left it in here just so you could see, it's no big deal, it happens. I pour the embossing powder and then realized that the beginning of my sentiment, the word deepest, didn't stamp properly. I didn't get enough of the Versamark ink on there, so the embossing powder is not sticking to it. But that's okay. I take a brush, I brush off all of the embossing powder, and then I just take it back to my Misty, and I do use the reverse side of the cardstock. You don't want to stamp it, try to restamp it again on that front side, only because it will probably turn into a blobby mess when you pour that embossing powder on it, because there is still some Versamark left behind. So I just flip it to the other side and I stamp it down. This time I stamp it down twice to make sure that I have a really good impression on the beginning of this sentiment. It was a little difficult. I don't know. I think it's the stamp itself, but the beginning of this word here on deepest just was difficult to get a really good impression down on the paper. But I did it. I stamped it a couple times, and it worked out just fine. It just needed a little extra TLC. So here we go. I'm going to put the embossing powder on it, and you'll see it's a beautiful sentiment. I love the script on it. And I also wanted my sentiment to be scripty because of the background. I think it just matched really well and just kept everything cohesive. So that is that. I'm gonna melt that down in just a second, and you'll see this card pretty much is done, and it just comes together very quickly. It's a really simple technique. You're just stamping down an entire image on your background and putting it on a base. That's pretty much what you're doing here. So it's really easy, but because the background stamp is just so beautiful, it just makes the card. It does not need anything extra. So here we go. I'm going to start lining it up. I'm going to just trim the edges. I do want to leave a little bit of the black cardstock around the text. I didn't want to cut it down up against the text. You know, I am using a white base, and so I wanted a little bit of that black trim to contrast against the, you know, trim that I'll have exposed on my base. So I just take a little bit off each edge and leave a little bit of the black cardstock. And then I just line up where I think my sentiment will go. I think it's perfect right there along the bottom. So I'm going to use my ATG gun as well as some wet glue. I do this a lot in my videos only because it gives me, the wet glue gives me some time to move my panel around and line it up exactly where I want it, instead of just grabbing onto the base and sticking right away if I make an error. It just gives me a couple seconds to just wiggle it around and line it up exactly how I want it. So I just press this down and this part is done. Now with the sentiment, I decided I thought it'd be a really nice touch because this is a single layer, although with the embossing powder it gives it dimension and gives it interest. I thought it'd be nice to just pop up the sentiment, and that just gives it a little bit of oomph to the card, because like I said, it is a very simple card, but it stands alone well, but I thought it'd be nice to just give it a little bit of added interest and dimension by just popping up the sentiment right there. And then I'll take my scissors and just trim off these edges, and I trim it down not to the base but to the panel, to the black panel. So I just do that. I got off screen here a little bit, but that's it, and the card is done, guys. Very simple, very beautiful. I hope you guys enjoy these little keep it simple videos. If you're not a subscriber, please do so. Leave a comment, like the video, and if you're already subscribed, you already know. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.